Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about forecasting how much produce you will have and what to do when you get that wrong, potato yields, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, happy Friday, growers. I hope everyone is looking forward to a productive weekend after a productive week. It's soccer coaching for me per usual this weekend. Also some soccer watching, some house repairs, normal dad stuff. Yesterday, I got a bed of peppers in. Nothing really fancy to say about that, except that I'm giving them a little bit more, like a fair amount of room this year, about 3 feet between plants, in hopes that I can get away with not trellising them. We will see if I end up regretting that decision, but it's worth a shot. I also plugged a little bit of sweet alyssum underneath of those plants or between them as my interplant this year for the peppers to increase the flower presence in and around the peppers, but also just on that side of the garden. More flowers always is my motto. I don't know if I've ever said it, but it's my motto now. Anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about tomato trellising and also crop rotations, and got a couple comments like this one from @JohnM.515, quote, "I've grown tomatoes in the same place for 10 years, no issues," end quote, which is entirely possible. I know a lot of people mentioned that Dowding has grown his tomatoes in the same place for a decade or so, and that's fine. My point is only that if in the next year it fails or the yields decrease considerably, then it would have been smart to rotate them. Especially as a commercial grower, but perhaps also as someone, reliant on that crop for their winter tomato sauces. Yes, healthy soil helps, absolutely. But how do you know if healthy soil describes the soil that you have or not yet? It may totally work forever to not rotate, who knows? But as someone who might rely on their production for a living, or as someone in my particular case offering advice to other growers, it's just a good idea to rotate crops if you can. And if you can't, just do the best you can to care for that soil. On Tuesday, I gave a breakdown of my day in the context of why it's so hard for me to find time to also give farm tours on top of everything else that I'm doing. And I thought this from @person, I don't think that's their real name, person01123 was funny, but a good question. Quote, "Would farm help assist with your disability to share farm knowledge in person? Your whine sounds a bit vain," end quote. Now, I assume you mean here inability and not disability, and I don't know what my comments have to do with whining or vanity, but come to think of it, that does sound like something a vain person would say. So fair. But hiring someone doesn't just all of a sudden free you up to do whatever you want. That sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy. When you have employees, especially in a business where the margins are as tight as they are in market gardening, suddenly your own work becomes even more important and focused, because not only do the bills need to get paid, which they do, but now you have someone's livelihood in your hands, and your work has to result in increased and sustained revenue. We did many farm tours for many years when we had employees, but even then we had to charge for those tours just to justify them time-wise, and could only handle a few a year. And I got to be honest, I really didn't love charging for it, but it was the only way that we could make it work for the lost revenue from me being out of the picture for those days. Of course, you could potentially build something like farm tours, agritourism, or education into the business plan, which I think is a great idea. For me, for our farm, it's just not in our current era in the cards for us. Plus, our gardens are right outside of our house, and it's kind of nice to have our own space, to be honest with you. Like, imagine people coming to visit your yard. So maybe once the kids are grown and I'm closer to retirement or something, I'll have more time and capacity for such things. But for the moment, I feel like sharing everything I can here is the best I can do. On Wednesday, we talked about the ecology of tarping, and I liked this from @ChrisInspiresYou, who wrote, quote, "I've been to plenty of successful farms that have tarps/landscape fabric down in every row, and they've burned holes in and planted right into it. Because of such, I've decided to do the same. Should I reconsider based on what you've shared?" End quote. This is a really great question, and it really cuts right to the heart of what is confounding about market farming and just about the world at large, right? In order to fit into the economy, profit not just is, but has to be put at the top of our endeavors to survive as business owners. bills, like I said, do have to get paid. We have to make more money than it costs us to grow food, so we have to look for ways to make that more efficient. Otherwise, there would be no farms. Tarps and just plastic in general is one way in which we can achieve that efficiency, or the efficiency we need affordably, but it comes with an environmental cost. One of the things to keep in mind about farming, though, is that unlike almost any other industry, we have the ability to improve and repair our soil and environments to make up for some of our negative contributions in a way almost no other industry can. So many businesses are purely extractive and never give anything back to the land that supports them. In farming, we can actually return some of what we took and improve the place that whatever our products are came from. So my advice here, if I have any, beyond change practically everything about the way the world operates, not as easy to do, is to just farm consciously and conscientiously, which is not as easy to say as consciously. I think it's important to recognize what the negatives are and try to develop systems like mulch, for instance, that move our farms away from a reliance on plastic and make up for its uses by using practices that help build and retain soil. Then on Thursday, we talked about building the ultimate deer fence, and I liked this from @KatrinaNolt5881, who described their deer fence, quote, 2 4-foot high fences, 6 feet apart around our garden in Pennsylvania, have kept the white-tailed deer out since we installed it 3 years ago. In the 6-foot space between the fences, we have egg-laying chickens. Works great for keeping down the grass and weeds, plus the chickens are nearby to eat any grubs and unwanted caterpillars that I find while working in the garden, end quote. I love this idea. Using 2 fences instead of tall fences is a common strategy with deer to exploit their depth perception issue, which we have discussed in other shows, but I like the chicken edition here. That's kind of cool. Also, almost no one indulged me in my request for what you would put in your fence if you budget was no issue, but there are several different small-scale fence ideas in the comments, which is admittedly probably more helpful. Anyway, great stuff as always this week, y'all. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, how many potatoes per pound to expect? BRB.
In the town on the hill where the apples grow, and the church bells ring every hour or so, I took a little walk just to see the ships coming in. The sun rose up right above the highway.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20-plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Garrett Mangini, who asks, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Thanks as always for everything you add to the conversation around market farming. I have a quick question about fingerling spuds, specifically estimating yields. Do you recommend estimating yields based on an expected harvest per plant or based on multiple of the total pounds of seed planted, i.e. 10 pounds of seed gets you 100 pounds of harvest? We just planted our potatoes, zone 6B or 8A, depending on the spring, and had to stretch the seed a bit more than expected. As we were cutting fingerling tubers in halves and thirds, I was thinking, would we get the same total yield if we planted 10 pounds on a 50-foot bed instead of stretching 10 pounds to fit a 100-foot bed? Thanks for any insight," end quote. Okay, so this is a fun question. Thank you. Also, the idea of an ag hardiness zone swinging from 6B to 8A is both amusing and relatable. I would say the same thing about rain for us. This year we got a monsoon season, which not typical. Last year it was a drought. Really keeps you on your toes, this weather stuff. All right, so the 1 pound of seed gets you 10 pounds of potatoes thing. is a rough estimate that you will hear a lot and may actually be high for many potato crops and especially fingerlings in general, but we'll get there. It's based effectively on getting at least 2 to 4 chunks from each pound of potatoes. Each of those chunks will create a plant, and if you get 2 plants from that initial pound of potatoes and both plants yield 5 pounds, you got 10 pounds from 1 pound of seed potatoes. But 3 plants will not necessarily or even likely get you 15 pounds. Does that make sense? In other words, the more you cut up a potato does not necessarily mean you will get a greater yield from the potato pieces weight-wise. Now, there is some research, depending on the variety that you are planting, that the larger potato chunks will garner a larger yield, albeit with some diminishing returns at a certain point. Like, you can't just plant giant potatoes and expect greater yields. 2 ounces is considered the standard size you want to shoot for per chunk. More confusingly, if you planted larger potato chunks with more eyes closer together, you may see smaller potatoes but slightly higher yields than if you planted smaller chunks further apart, where you would get larger potatoes but perhaps less or equal yield. So put another way, maybe you have smaller chunks and think, if I give these more space, I'll get more potatoes. But that's not really how the potatoes roll. You may just get a handful of larger potatoes weighing about the same in total or less than if you planted the bigger chunks closer together. Yeah, it's like that. It's weird. Yields with potatoes are actually quite interesting in this way. It's almost like a seed potato wants to just produce as many pounds as it wants to produce, no matter how you cut it and plant it. Now, in general, yields on fingerlings tend to be lower than your standard potatoes like Yukon Golds and often take longer to grow. There is a reason fingerlings are considered a specialty item with restaurants. They take up more time and space for fewer potatoes. But also, fingerlings are ridiculously tasty, so they deserve the higher price tag on all fronts. I would recommend for most people to expect 150 to 200 pounds of potatoes per 100 foot planted. If you get more, that's great. If you get less, that's not great. But for fingerlings, that would not be abnormal. Conditions and varieties will make a huge difference with this crop. Diseases and pests obviously can have a big impact, especially on potatoes, where things like Colorado potato beetle can absolutely devastate a patch. Anyway, I guess the short answer is that cutting up the potatoes into more chunks may not result in higher yield, or at least that's what the research says. So I hope that's helpful. And if the soil ever dries a little bit more here, I hope to get more of our potato sprouts trial going this next week. One fun story, I was walking through our current potato patch the other day and noticed a bug on them. And I was like, dang it, potato beetles. But it turns out it was just lady beetles chowing down, presumably on flea beetles or eggs of some pest, or maybe there were some aphids there. I don't know. I'm not sure, but happy to have those friendlies hanging out. More on all that later. Otherwise, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, overselling to chefs and others. Be right back. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. Today's episode of Growers Daily is also brought to you by Ring of Fire. What if you could turn your brush problem into black gold? The Ring of Fire biochar kiln is your spring tool for soil transformation, converting woody debris into high-quality biochar in just hours. Biochar will kickstart your compost, retain water and nutrients in your soil, and provide habitat for beneficial microbes. Now $19.95 with flat rate shipping. Their spring sale runs through June. Don't wait to boost your soil and optimize your inputs. Visit ringofire.earth/growers now to learn more. Also, for more information on biochar, check out the No-Till Market Garden podcast interview with Kelpie Wilson, inventor of the Ring of Fire kiln, that we will link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. Okay, so I got an interesting question from our friend Affarmations over there on Instagram recently, who asked, quote, I have a question that I'd love people's input on. Not sure if this is a good way to ask it, but if you're selling wholesale in particular, how do you handle the uncertainty of yield? For instance, if I grow one bed of carrots and expect 100 pounds yield, obviously completely hypothetical, do I try to contract with a place to sell all 100 pounds? Do I try to contract with them to sell that minus a margin for error? And if so, how do I figure that out? And then how do I handle coming up short or easier to handle a gangbusters crop? Just curious how others do it because I've never worked somewhere that did wholesale and that's all I want to do, end quote. All right, so this is a great question. Now, the advice I generally give to people when it comes to selling and forecasting, especially on large amounts like that, is less about getting it right and wrong and more about keeping a good, honest line of communication open with that customer. What I mean is that let's say you're contracted to or expected to produce based on an agreement or contract of 100 pounds of carrots, like your example. You will know pretty early on what the stand looks like, and if you can, barring a disaster, likely produce the requested amount. If you see that the germination is poor, that's when you shoot a message to that client and say it right then and there that either one, you will likely come up short on the carrot order, or two, it will be delayed. That way, if they need to supplement, they have the time and they will appreciate you not taking it to the absolute last minute to tell them about it. Or let's say you get it hit with carrot maggots, like right in the middle of production. You can usually tell from like the yellowing of the leaves, or something late in the growing cycle that just ruins the yield. Just let them know immediately when you know something's up. Maybe even reach out to someone else in the area first, whom you know is also producing carrots, and ask them if they may have enough to supplement what you don't have. You don't have to buy those carrots necessarily, though you could, I guess. But the client will appreciate you doing that little bit of extra work for them to locate another source. Now, if you have a bumper crop, try and identify it as early as possible and start looking for other customers. Ask that buyer if they'd be interested in more than the allotted amount. Of course, carrots are easy in this way because they're also a storage crop, which can free up some time to find a new client for them or wait till that original client needs more. It will happen to every grower at some point where you come up short or oversell or think a crop is going to be ready before it actually is. Obviously, experience will help a lot with this, and establishing early on that you may come up short with that client is a really important part of this communication element. Weather changes, droughts or rainstorms throw a wrench into things or decrease yields. This is a wild business and frankly a difficult business. The biggest thing for me is just being open and honest, i.e. good communication from the start. I really like that phrase I learned from Mikey and Kez down there in Australia, that clear is kind. Just be clear and open and honest with your customers and they will appreciate that. Then, of course, learn from those mistakes. Take notes and try to improve every year. Also, as you suggested, make sure to be upfront with them that things can go awry. But assure them you will let them know the second that you can if something is amiss. That understanding needs to be established up front that, well, nature isn't always playing nice. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I'm going to wrap up the week there. Don't forget we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Share it with some friends. Let them know you like the podcast. That's helpful. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Patrick Weaver and Wesley Campbell, keeping the story going to its conclusion this week. Good job, everyone. All right, so people tend to think that the trick to time travel is going to be technology, but it turns out that effective time travel is really about punk music and iconic venues, as we learned this week in the story. So Kate figured that this group that had arrived at her farm and there in North Yorkshire had to get back to New York to the Bowery to visit the famous CBGB venue, which, to be sure, was not technically around until the 1970s, but Kate figured that was their best shot. Kate, feeling a little responsible, had some savings and offered it to them to help pay for their trip back. So the gang left, and as they were leaving, one of the members of the group asked Kate, "Did you ever think about going back and trying to go back?" And Kate said, "Sure, I thought about it, but I felt like this is where it meant to be. And I was put here for a reason." And so the member of that group, nodded agreeingly. Well, it was nice to meet you, they said, and maybe we'll meet again one day. And the man joked, "Maybe if we can't get back, I'll just start that venue so we can meet again later." And the two laughed and shook hands. Then Kate thought to herself, "I thought he looked familiar." Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you on Monday for Monday. I assume. It's a few days away. Somebody could change the name. That's fine. Either way, I'll be there. Bye.
That I'm the lucky one. I'm your chosen one. Picture frames
When it comes to Mother's Day, at Ritual, we believe in giving her flowers. But are flowers what she actually wants? We asked around, and flowers are fine, but most women would prefer science-backed gut support that never wilts. While we're at it, throw in Stress Relief, our chill pill designed with clinically studied forms of ingredients to reduce daily stress. Did we mention that all of our supplements are clean, vegan, and third-party tested for heavy metals and microbes? Because if you ask us, the thought counts, but traceable science and sourcing count more. Find your Ritual. Get what you really want this year, whether you're a mom or not, with 40% off your first month at ritual.com/podcast. That's RITUAL.com/podcast for 40% off your first month. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.